2 more days, yay! Hey, Barbara.
Hey, Rabbi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Other than wanting to put a pencil in my eye, just great.
I miss you, Barbara. We're gonna save you some extra special chocolate that we have tonight.
So, of course, you always have special chocolates when I'm not there.
Specifically, that's why we did it.
I know. I just miss being with you guys.
All right, everybody. Good evening. All right, so I want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to do this evening. As you'll notice, I have a screen here today instead of the whiteboard. So tonight's topic is, I believe it's called Hatred and Heroism. And we're going to do a little bit of discussion. And then I'm going to show you, we're going to listen to 2 testimonies of survivors. I was trying to see if somebody was able to come tonight, but we weren't able to have anybody come in person tonight. So we're going to listen to 2 testimonies of survivors. One is a member of our congregation, Irving Beanstock. Another one is a member, another woman who actually is, for those of you who don't know, my brother is also a rabbi. So there's family who I've known like my whole life who are members of his congregation, and the woman's mother is also a survivor. I happened to have met her this past Pesach, and then she spoke at Yom HaShoah at his congregation. So they're 2 very different testimonies. So I wanted to present them both to you. So Barbara and Rebecca, I only have 1 computer, so it won't record during that, but I can send you tomorrow the links to those recordings if you want to listen to them. So we will have a small discussion, maybe 25 minutes. We'll listen to those, which is why we have this screen, and then we'll come back afterwards also to like wrap up the discussion. All right, so if you open your books, we're going to kind of jump right into on page 224. So basically, there's 3 parts to this. There's the kind of biblical period of anti-Semitism, religious anti-Semitism, and racial anti-Semitism. So in the biblical period, the different tragedies that befell the Jewish people weren't necessarily like anti-Semitic in nature, as opposed to these 3, Pharaoh, Haman, and Antiochus, who are specifically this anti-Jewish hatred. So I want to just read these 3 together, and then we'll discuss together at the bottom what's going on. So page 224, Biblical Histories of Anti-Semitism. Do I have somebody who wants to read Pharaoh? Okay, thank you.
And a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, look, the Israelites are growing too numerous for us. Let us deal shrewdly with them so that they may not increase. Otherwise, in the event of war, they may rise up and join our enemies.
Okay, can somebody read Haman from the story of, on Purim? Any readers? Small few lines. If you don't read that, you might have to read Antiochus, which is longer. Patty?
So help me with the king's name.
Yes.
Haman said to King
Achashverosh.
Okay, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed among us, whose laws are different from those of any other people who do not obey the king, and it is not in your majesty's interest to tolerate that.
Okay, and one more, Antiochus. We have a reader? Okay, thank you.
Then the king wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and that he should give up his customs. And the king sent letters by messengers to Jerusalem and the cities of Judah. He directed them to follow customs strange to their land, to forbid burnt offerings and sacrifices in the sanctuary, to profane the Sabbaths and the feasts, to defile the sanctuary and the priests, to build altars and sacred precincts and shrines for idols, to sacrifice swine and unclean animals, and to leave their sons uncircumcised. They were to make themselves abominable by everything unclean and profane, so that they should forget the law and change all the ordinances. And whoever does not obey the command of the king shall die.
Thank you very much.
Julie's locked out from going to get her.
Thank you. There's always somebody who gets locked out. I'm glad people are friends. So, all right, let me just get back in here. All right. So, looking at these 3 stories, which are specific, express a particular hatred of Jews. Let's look at the questions on the bottom. So what themes do you notice in common about in these three passages? Is there anything in common of these three passages?
Fear of outsiders, people that do things different way.
Right, great, like fear of the other kind of,
Yeah.
great, yes.
I was gonna say, they are always talking about people doing things differently than they do. So with the outsiders, because they're just different people.
Different, right? They're not like there's no like, they're not like conforming, right, to what they want to do. Great, thank you. Any other thoughts? Yes, Bunny. And then Patty.
Nowhere does it specifically mention Jews, it just mentions any people that do not do what we do. Nowhere does it specifically.
So you are right in these specific verses, but let's just take from Haman, because we know that story. So we know it's referring to the Jewish people based on other,
We know they're all referring, but they're just.
yes, correct. Based on other, verses around it, we know that the certain people are the Jewish people. So yes, in these specific verses, it doesn't mention them. You are correct. Okay, so how about, let's move on. Oh, Patty, I'm sorry.
All three of them were packaged with somebody in a position of power, all three are kings. And it looks as if they're trying to keep subdued those that are under them, so that they can remain in power.
Oh, I like that. I wasn't thinking about that. That was great. Okay, what relationship does this form of anti-Semitism bear to modern expressions? So like, how is what we're reading in here, right, from a long time ago, if you think about today anti-Semitism, is there any similarities in what you're reading? Could you like replace modern day situations with this? So I'll just give you an example of what I'm thinking of, right? Like fear of the other, right? That other person who we just don't, for whatever reason, fear of the other is still like something prevalent today. We fear something other, often because we just don't understand it, or we just don't know about it, not because that other person is actually scary, we just don't understand it. And then we just have, this, I think kind of irrational fear.
I think it's relative to even Germany, to some degree. There's different, they hate us for different reasons,
Mhm.
but one was becoming powerful. And as Patty said, I mean, they were scared they were gonna lose power. So in a way, it's similar to this.
Great, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So actually a really good analogy, actually, with the kings and then with everything in Germany.
One.
Yeah.
I mean, even though Jews today are more integrated into the community, they're still, at times not accepted or looked at, as you're other, you're still not the same.
Correct. And it's like, you have to think about it, like, as we talked about, right? Like, there's no typical look. Anybody can look Jewish, right? We all look different in this room, right? And so it's like, what is the fear of us? Why are they fearful of us? What, be scary looking people? I would think not. I mean, so it's not irrational fear, or like what they learned from in the past. Yeah.
I think you're right, talking about fear of the unknown, but I mean, I moved here to Charlotte when I was 12, and there were very few Jews here back then. And I experienced a lot of ignorance about being Jewish, but I experienced zero anti-Semitism.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, whereas my husband grew up in Southern California, where there's lots of Jews, and he would get in fistfights over being Jewish. And so,
Oh, interesting.
I mean, I experienced a lot of ignorance, and people were curious, but I never experienced any outright anti-Semitism. I had a few people that wanted to save me.
Right.
But
I mean, look, curiosity is good, right?
yeah.
Curiosity about people is good. I mean,
Yeah, I was happy to, explain to
I'm glad that was your experience. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I would say hatred is taught. It's
Mhm.
not, you're not born hating. I think that some of the things I heard that were anti-Semitic was, oh, the Jews killed Jesus. That was one big one. And someone in college said to me, oh, but you don't have horns. You're taught that.
Right.
And so I think people as much as you may dress different, let's be honest, the ultra orthodox,
Yeah.
they all dress differently.
Absolutely.
But the rest of us, and I think that's also why there was probably after World War II, in this country in particular, a great movement towards assimilation, right?
Yeah.
People also changed their names when they came to this country.
Right. So that you wouldn't know they were Jewish.
But all of that is taught. It's not innate.
Right. I was gonna say it's 100% right, that you're not born with hatred. Right. You're taught. It's something learned. Yes.
Anti-Semitism isn't confined to rednecks and people like that. Okay, many of the high-ranking Nazis during the Second World War were college graduates and some held PhDs, as far as that goes. In this country, Henry Ford, were raving anti-Semite.
Right. It doesn't mean you're an uneducated person if you're an
Yes.
anti-Semite.
This isn't something that's like, well, you know, these people are keeping you down. No, that's not the fact at all.
Right.
It has no bearing. It's what she was saying. It's what you're raised to believe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the next. What do you think each of these stories, why do you think each of these stories came to be associated with a holiday? What would be the purpose of that, Penny?
Because they basically have a positive outcome,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something that we shouldn't forget. It's reminding us of stories that are not in the Torah,
Mm-hmm.
but they're necessary to remember. And as I said, we didn't lose, we won.
Yeah, great. Wonderful, thank you. Any other thoughts? I think that perfectly summed up what I was going to say, so that was great. Okay, so let's move from the biblical stories, right, of anti-Semitism to religious anti-Semitism. So actually, I'm just going to turn in our books, because a lot of the things I want to talk about are actually they really gave you the text, you know, the meat of it in your books. So
Do you know that the video on anti-Semitism, it went right into Israel? And I wonder if that's because this book is a newer book than when those videos were made. But there was no video.
I'm looking to see, because usually it tells me at the end, it'll say, make sure the students watch the video.
I thought that was interesting.
There was no video.
Yeah, and in here, in Bunny, it's interesting because, like I said, normally it'll tell me remind students to watch the video, which I don't because I know you guys watch it. It does not tell me to remind you to watch the video.
Because it wasn't there.
That's interesting.
And then the online portion,
One more time.
on one foot, would it be connected to that somewhere?
Well, that's what Bunny was saying. It's not connected to it. All the other videos are connected to the online.
Right.
Interesting. Well, I wonder if because maybe, actually, I'm not sure why. I don't have an answer.
Okay.
But none of you missed it. Just, you didn't miss it. It wasn't there. So if we turn to the religious anti-Semitism on 225, right? So as you'll see, it says anti-Semitism changes significantly with the introduction of rival monotheistic faiths. First, Christianity seeks to take the mantle of biblical Judaism and rejects its parent religion through the doctrine of supersession. Later, Islam claims that it is the inheritor of the biblical tradition and supersedes all previous traditions. Judaism's refusal to acknowledge both Christian and Muslim claims of superiority leads to the ongoing persecution. And if you read here in the Christian world, it'll tell you different examples of the persecution that Jewish people lived. In the Muslim world, different examples of the types of persecution that was done to the Jewish people. Just gonna kind of leave that there. We're gonna move on to racial anti-Semitism, unless anybody has anything else about the religious anti-Semitism. Okay. Moving on to racial anti-Semitism. So we'll just read on page 226. Beginning in the 19th century, the idea of race becomes popular in Europe. This is strongly linked to the development of modern biology, specifically the idea of taxonomy, ordering higher and lower species, and Darwin's theory of evolution, which was misunderstood by some to suggest that humans might be ranked from less evolved forms to more evolved forms. So what is going on in this part? It's basically showing us here that, so first of all, in 1879 is when the term anti-Semitism was, I guess, coined as a term in Austria in 1879. But if you notice the shift here with this racial anti-Semitism as opposed to before, it's really discussing Jews in biological kind of scientific terms rather than religious terms, which was on the page before. And this is really, well, actually, did you read page 22, 26? Let's just read it together. Do I have a reader? Because then we're going to move on to our testimonies, but I want to make sure we kind of see kind of how the Holocaust kind of grew out of this. Please, thank you.
Certain anthropologists would fain teach us that all races are equally gifted. They point to history and answer that is a lie. Races of mankind are markedly different in the nature and also in the extent of their gifts. And the Germanic races belong to the most highly gifted group usually termed Aryan. Physically and mentally, the Aryans are preeminent among all people. For that reason, they are by right the lords of the world.
Yeah, thank you.
The entry of the Jews into the history of the West signifies therefore beyond doubt the entrance of a definite element quite different from and in a way opposed to all European races. These considerations make it our right and our duty to look upon the Jew in our midst as a particular and in fact alien element. Outwardly, his inheritance was the same as ours. Inwardly, it is not so. He has inherited quite a different spirit. The chief result of our anatomical survey is that the Jewish race is in truth a mongrel race which always retains a mongrel character.
Thank you. So it came to me, so the Shoah is the Hebrew word that we use for Holocaust, right? Like Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. And the Shoah was really best understood as, really an outgrowth of this type of racial anti-Semitism, right? Because the whole idea here is really, you have to purify the blood of Europe, right? Where religious anti-Semitism that we read on the page before was really about convincing the Jews to accept the truths of Christianity or Islam, right? And to convert them. Where this racial anti-Semitism, right, the goal is to eliminate the Jews because they're a threat. So it's very different. I mean, very different. Looking at people, one is like, we just have to, somebody said people were trying to show them the right way. Julie, did you say that? You might have said it. They wanted to save you, right? So like on one hand, the religious anti-Semitism is like, we want to show people the right of way. We want to save them, not looking to kill them, just looking to save them. But racial anti-Semitism is something completely different. Like they're, Jewish people are mongrels. They're, beyond saving, basically. Any thoughts on kind of, it's a lot. I mean, it's very intense, this page. Yes.
Well, I don't know what the rest of the book is.
The rest of this book?
The rest of.
Oh, where this came from.
Houston Stewart Chamberlain book.
Yeah.
All right. This is bullshit.
What do you mean?
There's no facts. There's nothing to support his premises here. There's no facts. There's only assumptions or interpretations. But there are no.
But this is the way, but the Holocaust was because they felt that the Jewish people, there was no saving. They wanted to purify the blood and everyone should be of the Aryan race.
They wanted a scapegoat for the problems that were going on that were driving them towards the war. And so they just, that was convenient. It could have been anybody else, but it was convenient because the Jews were all over Europe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they left. Their greatest concentration was just when the Romans took over Israel or, or Judea
Hmm.
and dispersed them. And they ended up all across Europe from that point forward. There were Jews everywhere. So these statements there's nothing to support this. It's just an opinion.
Okay. Hmm.
Houston Stewart Chamberlain is a relative that's related to Neville Chamberlain.
Hmm.
This is typical of the British upper class,
Hmm.
as far as that goes. He's buried in Bayreuth. I've seen his grave.
Hmm.
We went over, my wife and I went over to see Wagner's house.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure if Richard Wagner was an anti-Semite. He probably was, but his wife was a raving anti-Semite. And if there's two people that really got misused and abused by the Nazis, it's Wagner and Nietzsche.
Well, I mean, Chamberlain was an anthropologist, right? This is from an anthropological lens, is where he's coming with this from.
But the Nazis all, and if you, as I read this, he might have had this view against Jews, but the Nazis, I'm thinking, if you just say he had this against Jews, took it another step up, right? It was gypsies, it was homosexuals.
Correct.
It was anyone who was non-Aryan. I mean, so I don't know, to your point, like if he also included others in here or not, but yes, Hitler did use the Jews as scapegoats.
Right, absolutely, absolutely.
Without a doubt. And Germany, if we think we have bad inflation now, in Germany at the time, it was far, far, far worse. So, and the Jews were the logical scapegoat.
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add to all these comments. The Holocaust Museum, they have a website. You can go there, you can look at any German film and see the history that goes back 1,000 years. And these purges happen every 150 to 200 years. Even before this anthropology or this idea of Darwinism among humans, they were always had some kind of animosity towards Jews. And every 150 years was just another purge. It was just like clockwork. They would kick out all the Jews. New Jews would come in under new leadership when people forgot, what happened last time. And eventually I think usually it had to do with banking. Jews were brought in and eventually they achieved high positions in banking, in culture, in whatever.
Right.
And when there was inflation, when the economy wasn't doing good, it was just an easy erase my debts. All the Jews gotta go. So it's just an amazing thing to see it happen in all these cities. And they were, before Germany was unified, it was happening here, it was happening here, it was happening here. The Holocaust was just one massive unified attempt at something that was happening over and over and over.
Oh, it's like that. We say like history repeats itself, right?
Yeah.
People live, they forget what happened, what was, and unfortunately, we just don't learn from history.
The thing is, it's like there's a little expression. If somebody says they're coming to kill you, assume that they are. All right. Hitler, when he was in prison, wrote Mein Kampf.
Right.
He made it right out in Mein Kampf. What he was going to do, when he was going to do it. There's a lot of ironies involved as far as Hitler was highly decorated in World War I for bravery, which is unusual for an enlisted guy in the German army. The guy that the commander that nominated him for the Second Iron Cross that he won, his captain was a Jew. The doctor who treated his mother for cancer. As far as that goes. And Hitler had this affinity for people who fought in the war. The German word for it is Kamerad. Okay, comrade. Hitler himself pardoned 207 Jews because they're comrade. That's all that's safe. And it's not just Germany. I spent a lot of time stationed in Europe. It's not just Germany. You can go to France. There's memorials there for the people killed. The Jews that were killed, especially like Strasbourg and Paris. You'll see the monuments. One of the greatest massacres of Jews according that happened at the castle when we look.
I'm listening.
Poland, yeah, Poland.
Ukraine, they beat the crap out of us.
There's no place in Europe you can go where you can't find atrocities, evidence of atrocities.
Yes.
We forced the Germans at the end of the Second World War. You're not tearing down any monument. You're not tearing down any concentration camp. Okay, you're going to keep them here. And you can go to any city in Germany, even to this day, and you'll see these different type of sculptures and modern stuff. And all of them will have on the inscribed on the EV, never again. In Germany. So it's, yeah, but I think if there's one country that's been cleansed, for lack of a better word, of the feelings that the Nazis had, it's probably Germany. And spread out from, and Germany has skinheads and they have all these guys, but that's not the same thing that Jews faced in the 20s and 30s.
Go ahead. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, it's a.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to make sure that we get to these videos. Remember your comment if you want to say it afterwards? Okay. Sure you don't want to say it now? Okay, so for Rebecca and Barbara, I'm not sure if this is going to work. If you get kicked off, I apologize, but let's just see if you're able to see or hear what's going on. All right, so give me 1 second. Okay, so the first one is going to be for Irving Vinsek, who I said is a member of our congregation. He's in his 90s, and you're going to hear his story.
If you share your screen, we'll be able to see on Zoom. Maybe click share screen. We'll be able to see it.
Yes. Hold on. Wait a second. Sorry. Oh, God, technology is so not my thing. Hold on. 1 second.
Green share button.
Yes. Okay. I haven't done this for so long. I was so much better last year with this. Share screen.
Yeah.
Share screen. Wait a second. Hold on. Okay, but that's not what I want you to see though. That's the second video. Hold on.
Okay. We can see whatever you just posted, Rabbi. Put up.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Sorry, that's my email. Okay. You can see that, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you for the help. Appreciate it. All right.
Lots of other things over here too.
Okay, so this is going to be about, oh wait, but the class isn't singing. Hold on. Hold for a minute. Hold for 1 moment.
Experiencing technical difficulty.
Oh, I know what it is. Hold on. See, I did test this all out today. I mean, it doesn't seem like it, but I actually tested this out this morning. Hold on. Okay. There we go. We are all on. Okay. Except for the sound. Is that because the microphone's plugged in, do you think?
It says unmute on my screen.
Yeah, YouTube is muted.
YouTube is muted?
No, it's fine.
But you're not hearing Irving speaking.
You might have to turn
Check your volume on your laptop, on the right side.
Nope, that's up. Speakers are on. Yep.
Is it the volume all the way up on your screen on your computer?
You have to hit play.
It is playing. Hold on. Okay, let me just take this out. This is the only thing that wasn't. That is it. Hold on, give me 1 second. Okay.
Rabbi, he also speaks very quietly.
And as you probably know, today is Yom HaShoah. Yom HaShoah is the medieval word Today we commemorate the 6 million Jews who were murdered by Nazis. Now, I'm going to be telling you my story, what it was like for a Jewish child to grow up in Nazi Germany. I was born in Dortmund, Germany. Dortmund is an industrial city with a population of about 600,000 people. My parents were middle class, and my father was an accountant, and my mother was a homemaker, and I had a younger sister by the name of Sylvia. We lived in a small apartment house, which was owned by my grandmother, aunt and uncle, and cousins. We also had apartments in the same house. Life was good for us. That is, until January of 1933. In January of 1933, when I was 6.5 years old, the Nazi Party won the national election in Germany, and Adolf Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany. Now, Hitler, during the election campaign, and many years before that, promised that if he were elected, he would bring jobs to the unemployed, he would abrogate the Versailles Treaty, and he would rid Germany of its Jews. He hated the Jewish people. He blamed the Germans of Jewish faith for all of Germany's problems, including the recession. Jews had lived in Germany for over 1,000 years, had full citizenship, served bravely in the armed forces of Germany during World War I. But now, if he were elected, he would get rid of the Jewish people. Right after Hitler came to power, groups of Nazi hoodlums wearing brown uniforms and wearing swastika armbands drove around the city in open trucks, and they would grab any Jewish men they could find on the streets and beat them up for no other reason than they were Jewish. Jewish students could no longer attend public schools, and I had to attend a segregated school that was run by the Jewish community of Dortmund. Higher education, such as high schools and universities, were no longer available to Jewish students. Then the Nazis went around the city and they painted on the front of Jewish businesses, "This is a Jewish business. Germans do not patronize this business." The Nazis then passed a number of laws known as the Nuremberg laws. These laws restricted the civil rights of Jews and also restricted the occupations that Jewish people could practice. For instance, Jews who were civil servants all lost their jobs. And in general, these laws made life for us very difficult. I was spat on while walking on the street. I was called a dirty Jew. I was beaten up by other kids, many of them older than I. And there was nothing that we could do about the beatings and all the other indignities which we were subjected to. And since we had to go to a Jewish school, the Nazi Hitler Jews knew where to find us. And they would wait for us when we got out of school and beat us up. I used to try different routes going home, and I became a very good runner. Nobody ever tried to help me or to interfere with the hoodlums, what they were doing to us. I don't call us dirty Jew, get out of Germany. And we would have left, except for the fact that no country in the world would let us in. Not France or England, Holland, Belgium, South America, Palestine, which was under British control at that time, and even the United States. The United States at the time had a very strict quota system and allowed only a small number of immigrants to enter the United States each year. Shortly after Hitler came to power, my father went to the American consulate in Stuttgart and registered for a quota number for immigration to the United States. In addition to the quota number, if it came up, you had to have a sponsor in the United States who would furnish an affidavit saying that he would guarantee that the immigrant would not become a public burden. Considering the fact that the the number of quota visas that were issued each year was very small, and the ability to find a sponsor who would guarantee that the immigrant would not become a public burden was very difficult. Not that many people were able to leave for the United States. I enjoyed playing soccer. Soccer was a very popular sport in Germany, and we would go to an open field that was near us and play soccer or try to play soccer. Always on the lookout to see if anybody was coming to break up our game and to beat us up before we had a chance to run away. Under Jewish dietary laws, we are required to eat kosher food, particularly meat. The Nazis then passed a law that kosher meat was forbidden. There was a kosher butcher store across the street from where we live, and one day I saw a bunch of Nazis enter the store, and they dragged the owner, Mr. Rosenfeld, out into the street. They beat him up, and then they set his beard on fire. Every day, whenever anybody left the house, one was always afraid of what would happen on the street and if you would get home safely. Not that you were really safe in your own home. Sometime in 1936, we were informed that we had to get out of the school building that we were attending. The building was needed for the Hitler Youth. Our school was, then had to move into an older Brandon school building, which was much smaller, and we had to go to double sessions. Then new laws were passed. Jews could no longer be treated by non-Jewish doctors. Unfortunately, there weren't many Jewish doctors in Dortmund, and some had managed to leave Germany. Initially, we thought that the Nazis would respect the Jewish war veterans who had served in the German army during World War I. These veterans had an organization called the Jewish War Veterans of Soldiers who served on the front line. In Dortmund, these veterans had a club and sports facility. And we used these facilities, and while in there, felt some measure of security. However, sometime in 1936, the Nazis closed the facility. You have to remember that prior to Hitler, World War I, some 100,000 Jewish men served in the armed forces of Germany, and 12,000 of them gave their lives for the fatherland. But now, there was no room for them anymore in Germany. One Sunday, my father took me to see an opera. When we got to the concert hall, we found a sign that said Juden verboten, which meant Jews not allowed. New laws have been passed. Jews could no longer attend concerts, movies, or any public facility functions. All parks and recreation facilities were closed to Jews. My father, as an accountant, worked for a number of Jewish-owned firms. In 1938, a new law was passed. Jews could no longer own a business. All business had to be sold through heirs. The law said so, but in fact, the Jewish owners did not receive any money. The money went to the Nazi party. Two of the businesses my father worked for were owned by cousins of my father. And they both manufactured and sold men's suits and coats. And one day, a Nazi came to the office and told my cousin that he was buying his business. My cousin told him, okay, he had no choice. And he told him, just give me a little time to take care of a few things, and then the business is yours. The Nazi left. My cousin wasn't about to hand over his life's work to the Nazis and give it all to the Nazis. And he immediately stopped production and started to liquidate the inventory. A short time later, the Nazi came back. And when he walked in, he said to my cousin, what is going on here? My cousin gave him some story, and when the Nazi left, my cousin, his wife, and daughter immediately left. They went to Cologne. From there, hired a smuggler who smuggled them into Belgium. My father was in the office when all of this happened, and he came home and told the story to my mother, who said to my father, you must leave immediately because you knew about what was going on there, and you did not report it to the police. The Gestapo will now come and they will arrest you. And my father left immediately. I was 12 years old at the time. I had gone to school that morning, And when I came home from school, my father was gone. It was Thursday, September the 20th, 1938. When we got home from school, my mother got my sister and me together and told us we had to be brave and Papa had to leave, that no matter what, we didn't know where Papa was, and we really didn't. That evening, my mother collected all the photos we had that had my father's picture in them, and she burned them. She did not want the Gestapo to have a photo of my father, so that it would be more difficult for them to find him. In fact, my father went to a nearby city, Gelsenkirchen, where our first cousin lived, and spent the night there. And in the morning, my cousin had a car drove into Cologne, and my father hired a smuggler who smuggled him into Belgium. The next morning, after my father had left, the Gestapo came to our house, and they wanted to know where my father was. My mother told them that he had gone to work. When they told her that he wasn't there, she told them, then you must have him. What did you do to him? My mother stuck to the story, and after a few days of questioning, they left us alone. Shortly thereafter, my sister was diagnosed to have diabetes. She needed medical care and medication. There was only one Jewish doctor left in Dortmund, and medications were difficult to obtain because of all the restrictions they had put on us. Now the situation was getting very desperate. They lived in Germany, about 30,000 Jews who were Polish citizens, who had migrated to Germany from Poland to Germany at the beginning of the 20th century to escape anti-Semitic persecution in Poland and also for economic reasons. Without warning, on a Friday morning, October the 28th, 1938, at 5:30 in the morning, police knocked at our doors. They were arresting all the Polish Jews who lived in Germany and deporting them to Poland. Early that morning, they took away my grandmother, aunt and uncle, and a number of cousins. They were allowed to take only the things with them that they could carry. They were put on a train and deported to Poland, where they were brought to the Polish border and dropped off in an open field. I never saw my grandmother, uncle and aunts and cousins again. They were all murdered by the Nazis. Among the people that were deported that day was a couple by the name of Greenspan. And the Greenspan had a son by the name of Herschel. You probably can see a picture. He's out in the hallway, and one of the posters there is a little picture of a young fellow there. That's Herschel Greenspan. He was about 17 or 18 years old, and he was going to school. He was living in Paris, France. He was going to school there. And he was so incensed at what had happened to his parents who had been deported to Poland that he took a gun, went to the German embassy, and shot the first secretary of the German embassy. The first secretary was severely wounded, and he succumbed to his wounds a day or two later and died during the night of November 8th. Now, we really immediately realized that we were in big trouble. That morning, Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister, got on the radio and told the German people that the Jews must be punished for this crime. On the night of November 9, 10, 1938, millions of Germans took to the streets, and they burned all the synagogues in Germany. My sister and I had gone to bed to be awakened by terrible noises in the street. I got up and asked my mother what was going on, and she told me there were some drunks outside. I got up and peered up from behind the curtains, and I could see that the synagogue a little further down the street was burning. And there were thousands of people out in the street breaking windows, and there were people yelling, Juden raus and Juden verrecken, which meant out with the Jews and exterminate them. At that moment, I thought that I was going to die. They were going from house to house, apartment to apartment where Jewish people lived, as well as Jewish businesses, and smashing any glass, crystal dishes, store windows, breaking up, beating up Jewish men, and taking many of them to concentration camps. During that night, they came into our house, and a very kind and brave Christian woman who lived in our building in an apartment on the top floor went down, and she met them downstairs and told them that we all had all been deported on October the 28th. And she showed them the seals that the police had put on the apartments where my grandmother and aunt and uncle had lived. And they left. Around 9 in the morning, they came back. And this time they came into our apartment and they started to smash our dishes, pistol, cutting up our bedding, and beating up a friend who was in our apartment, knocking out his front teeth. Among the Nazis that came into the apartment was a policeman. My mother told the policeman, "Why are you allowing these people to do this to us? You are supposed to protect us." The policeman told her, "You dirty Jew, we want you to get out of Germany." My mother then grabbed my sister and I and ran out of their house and went to the police station. And she demanded that they protect us. The policeman behind the desk said, "Okay, I'll put you in protective custody." And he started to take a key out from along the desk. And as soon as my mother saw that, she grabbed us by the hand and ran out of the police station. People who were put in protective custody never came back. When we got home, the Nazis had left, and our apartment was a big mess. There were broken glass, broken windows, dishes, all broken shutters from our bedding, and belongings were strewn all over the house. That night, the night of November 9th, 10th, became known as Kristallnacht or Crystal Night. During that night, 91 Jewish men were murdered, and 30,000 Jewish men were taken and put into concentration camps. More than 300 synagogues were burned and destroyed. After Crystal Night, the Jewish community of Germany was fined 1 billion marks to pay for the damage. We were responsible for the damage. It was the beginning of the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were murdered. Shortly after Crystal Night, a Nazi came to our house and told us that we had to get out of the house. He was the new owner. Where do we go? On January 1, 1939, was New Year's Day, it was on Sunday. My mother dressed my sister in warm clothing, packed a small suitcase, and bought a train ticket to Amsterdam, Holland for her. My sister was 10 years old and did not have a visa to go to Holland. My mother got on the train and with her and walking, got on the train and I'm walking through the train, asked people to take my sister to Amsterdam. Fortunately, there was a very kind Dutch woman on the train who had a daughter my sister's age, who was not with her, but who was noted in that passport. And she agreed to take my sister to brought her to Amsterdam, where she turned over to the Jewish community of Amsterdam. My mother then went home, and she did the same thing with me on Sunday, January 15th, 1939, 2 weeks later. And I was 12 years old at the time. However, this time nobody on the train would help us. When we got to the border, an SS man came on board to check the passport. He took my mother's passport from her and she had to get off the train. He allowed me to stay on, even though I did not have a visa to go to Holland. After I crossed the border, the Dutch border police came on board and I showed him my passport, which had no visa. He asked me where I was going. I told him that I was going to visit my uncle in Amsterdam. He told me I was lying, and he was right. And he took me off the train, and I thought he was going to send me back to Germany. The policeman had me sit on a bench on the platform. It was very cold, and he brought me a cup of hot chocolate and a cheese sandwich, and he left and told me to sit there. I sat there for several hours. In the meantime, two trains came by, going back to Germany, and they did not put me on these trains to send me back. After a while, the policeman came back and took me to a small hotel. Evidently, they weren't sending me back, at least not that night. I stayed in the hotel for 2 nights, and then in the morning, a Jewish man from Arnhem came and took me to his home in the city of Arnhem. I stayed there overnight in his house. And in the morning, he took me by train to a children's home in Wijkandlee, which is what is on the coast of Holland. And there I found my sister. We stayed there for 3 months, and then we were sent to an orphanage in Amsterdam, where there were other children who had gotten there by kinder transport. I was in the orphanage till April of 1940. In the meantime, after I fled to Holland, my mother hired a smuggler to smuggle her into Belgium. She was caught by the Germans the first time, and they spent the night in jail, but made it into Belgium on the second try. The quarter number my father had registered for at the American consulate in 1933 had come up, and he received a visa to come to the United States. He came to the United States in June of 1939. Once in the United States, my father found a sponsor for my mother, my sister, myself, and we received our visa to come to the United States in March of 1940. We were reunited on April the 5th, 1940, as we boarded the ship that would take us to the United States. And we left Rotterdam on April the 5th, 1940, and arrived in New York on April 17th, 1940. And the Germans invaded Holland, Belgium, and France on May the 10th, 1940. And we were probably on the last ship to leave Holland for the United States before the German invasion. I returned to Europe exactly 5 years later, on April the 5th, 1945, when I passed through the Straits of Gibraltar on the United States troop ship USS Wakefield on the way to Italy as a soldier in the United States Army during World War II. That is my story, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
So I'll just stop there. I mean, Irving's story is, I mean, you know, every survivor has a story. I mean, it's remarkable when you think about like how he remembers every date when all of these things happen, every piece of it. I mean, he was only 12 years old, his sister was 10, you know, and, you know, every time I listen to a story, I just think, you know, every choice that his parents made, you know, they have no idea what to do. But every choice, they just, you know, they wanted to save him, they wanted to save the daughter, the father left, the mother left. Like, it's incredible how they were all reunited. I mean, it's, you know, there was no cell phone, right, to like figure out, there was no this, there was that. There was, once the person was gone, you just hoped you would see them again. I mean, it's unbelievable. In the same place. I mean, it's an amazing story, amazing story. Yeah. And that's why so many people don't have any memories from that time, right? They got rid of all of their stuff. They didn't want any connection. They didn't want anybody to know who they were. And so people who did survive literally have like no pictures of relatives. Yeah, it's an amazing story. I mean, it truly is an amazing story. And one of the things I was going to say, you know, that Irving does is there's something here called the Butterfly Project. Started in 2006 in San Diego. We joined, the GCC joined it, and Shelley Park joined it in 2008, and they bring groups of kids and adults here and basically educate them about the Holocaust. You know, he tells the story with another member, Suli Chenkin tells her story, in addition to other people who tell their story. And the kids, you know, if you ever, there's an exhibit, you can see the big butterfly outside, it's in the parking lot, like over by the library, by Building D, if you haven't seen it, and it has butterflies. The kids make butterflies and put them on there, and the idea was to make, you know, a butterfly to represent every child that was killed and how was murdered in the Holocaust. So, you know, that is his way that he helps to educate people so that nothing like this ever, you know, happens again. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mhm. And I think and then Beth, I'll call you. I think the thing is, when you hear it's, easy to say that, there are many survivors and many people, were murdered, but when you hear each individual story, it really like hits you, when he tells you about his cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents, it like drives it home. Because I know in my head, when people talk about it, I just think, oh, my aunts, my uncles, cousins, this. And it really just like, it's powerful. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm. Wow. One paragraph about it. Wow. That's really sad.
I had a different experience. We were at night and
Mm.
much more in-depth. And we learned about it, and then we learned about it.
But it's interesting though, in one state as opposed to another state, like what, what's the reason for that? Mm-hmm. So you also learned it in depth, kind of like Jennifer. Any other thoughts or what people did or didn't learn in school?
I think just now in general, like coming from education, science and social studies is like pushed to the side for doing it fast. History as a whole is pushed aside.
Which is so sad. I mean, so to that point, I just wanted to tell you, there is, Steven Spielberg did this years ago, USC Shoah Foundation, and they have like thousands of some are just testimony slideshows, but some are videos like this one. So Irving actually, he doesn't have a video there, but he has a slideshow and like a transcript there. But I mean, it's actually really remarkable. Like, I mean, he deserves a lot of credit, Steven Spielberg, for coming up with this idea. Because just what you're saying, like in a few years, right, these survivors are like nearing 100, they're not going to be alive much longer. So it really does capture it in like real time, hearing them, tell the story. And like I've watched a number of the stories, and it is like everybody, I mean, it's so sad to listen to, but it's everybody, it's so different. Everyone had like a different, unique experience. And I think it's important that we listen to those testimonies, so that we are, able to pass that on, that information, and teach other people. Mm. Mm-hmm. Right. But I mean, it's very sad because it's part of history and it's important to learn. I mean, but yes, you're probably right. It's a fear to offend anybody. Yeah. Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. So before we actually, because I don't know if we're gonna have enough time for all of, I'm just looking for all of Molly's story. But one of the things I do wanna, let me just stop sharing this for one moment here. Is if everybody wants to, I think it's important kind of like just even just reading, just listening to Irving's story. I think there's a place, I feel like to do a little bit of journaling. So if you wanna, in the back of your book, there's like 2 blank pages. Sometimes, you know, if you hear something or you wanna just kind of mark it down, there should be like 2 blank pages in the back. Yeah, you were correct. So why don't we just stop for a little bit, you know, and just kind of to think about, reflect upon, thank you for that, Beth, on page 230, right? Take a moment to write your reflections to the story, what struck you most powerfully, what do you want to make sure you remember? This will be private, but just take a few minutes to think about this story and kind of what you want to hold on to, you know, from his story. Give a couple more minutes. Take like 3 more minutes for people to, to finish their thoughts, and then we can discuss. Okay, Stephanie, did you want to say something?
Yeah, going back to what we were talking about, the fact that we don't teach it in school. As a result, that's when it gets really scary. Because as a result, when people don't know what the history is and there's a void,
Yes.
anyone can come in and they can bend the mind of the majority, and it always injures the minority. So-
No, it's very scary that it's not taught.
I mean, it's happening in our day and time right now.
Right.
And the people,
Forget the past.
I mean, I think that's why, like, one of the beautiful things of the Butterfly Project, right? And it really, it amazes me how many kids, like how many public schools, they keep, coming and sending kids every year, which is amazing.
It's part of their curriculum.
It's part of the curriculum,
Public and private school.
but think about how many schools don't come, right? Or places that don't have it and kids aren't learning it. Yeah.
People should keep in mind too, subjects like Holocaust and other travesties in whole PhDs and dissertations have been written about that one particular subject or one aspect of that subject. So in the public schools, there's just no way you can go into that detail. You don't have the time.
But you may not have the time, but it's more than one paragraph. Like Beth was saying, I feel like, because, I feel like even thinking about when I was in school, if there was one paragraph about it, then it wasn't so important, right? But it is of such importance, and there's one paragraph given to it.
You can spend a day or two, on nothing else.
I think when there's no survivors left, it's gonna be easier for Holocaust deniers.
Yeah, Beth.
I remember, I don't know how long ago this was, there was a school that the teachers wanted to really show the children what 6 million really was, and I think it's called the Penny Project.
The paper clips.
The paper clips, sorry.
Yes.
In Tennessee.
In Tennessee.
That was, they've made a
Yeah.
documentary about it, and it was just an amazing way to show the
Was-
children and the impact 6 million really is.
And that's why I was saying, like, if you just say 6 million, it is so hard to comprehend. But if you break it down, right, like kind of like saying, you listen to each individual story, or you break it down into paper clips. If you haven't seen the paper clips movie documentary, it's amazing, and it really brings it to life. Like, it's such a number, we can't even fathom what that number is. Any other thoughts that anybody wants to share? Any feelings, thoughts that came up with this? Yes, Patty.
One thing I thought was very remarkable about Irving's talk was the last 8 seconds of what he said, where he said, and then I joined the army and I went through the Straits of Gibraltar as a soldier and went back to Europe. Any questions? And I thought,
It just kind of ends abruptly.
like, whoa, what were you feeling and thinking as you were returning 5 years later back to the area of the world where your family was sent off to die, where your whole life was destroyed? How did you feel about that as you're coming back to that?
And I remember like hearing one of his other videos correctly, it was almost like 5 years, like to the day, like it was like.
That's what I think he was saying, yeah.
And I mean, how old was he? So, I mean, if this happened when he was 12, is he saying 5 years from then or 5 years from when?
From 1940.
Right, 18, 19,
Right at
12,
18.
Yeah, I mean, he's not even an official,
Right.
you know, like an adult, I guess you could say there.
But see, I understand why he went back. He was fighting for freedom.
Right.
I mean, because he came to a free country
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't want what happened to his family to continue to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I just can't imagine what's going through his mind as he was returning and seeing what had happened to the part of the world that he grew up in.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because when I've spoken to survivors, you know, some people really want to go back and see, like even in this day, they want to go back, even though, you know, their house is not there, there's nothing left. And some people are like, I never want to step foot in a country again. Because I think everybody has such a different reaction to it, depending on, you know, what their situation was, what they went through. Very different.
Rabbi,
Yeah, hold on one second. Yeah, Barbara.
I was just gonna say that one of the most emotional moments Bob and I had, we took a trip and part of the trip was to go to Auschwitz and Buchenwald. And my friend said, what could you learn? You know everything about the Holocaust. And my answer to them was, when you stand in that place, when you walk through that gate, when you see grown men on a tour cry, then you truly understand what has happened. And we were very privileged to have a lot of Gentile people with us who you could see the emotion of just, oh my God, what these people must have gone through. And we stood at Buchenwald and said Kaddish for a soldier who asked a friend of his who was on the tour to say it. And every one of those Gentile people stood with us when we said Kaddish. So you get, if you're, I hate to use the word fortunate, but it is, if you are fortunate enough to see a camp, then you truly understand what happened.
Right. And
not just words.
There's it's called USY Pilgrimage, and it is a trip that educates teens and takes teens. You know, they go 3 weeks to Eastern Europe to some of the camps, like Barbara, you know, went on a tour. I mean, you know, and then they go to Israel, right? So that you're not just stuck in the past, in the tragedy, but then you move to the hope at the end of it. Somebody just had their hand up. Yes, go ahead.
When I was
And
in
then Buddy.
grad school, I studied in Europe.
Thanks,
for
Barbara.
6 weeks. I spent a week in Prague.
Mhm.
And so me and 3 other friends decided to skip school one day and we took a train up to Auschwitz. To see it. And I was the only Jewish person in the group. About halfway there, all of a sudden hit me that I was on a train to Auschwitz. And I just lost it. And they didn't understand at all. But it, like Barbara said, it was really powerful, and I mean, it was a hard day, but it was the first thing. You know, the Auschwitz has been made more into a museum, and then there's broken out, which is the death camp, just kind of kept the way it was, and seeing you know the furnaces, it was powerful.
Yeah, thank you, Buddy.
As much as we don't have a great education about what happened to the Jews, there's even less education about what happened to the non-Jews that were out there. I mean, there were millions and millions of non-Jews that were also persecuted, unless you get the mold of an area.
Yeah.
So It's interesting that these other groups, if you want to call them that, don't speak up
Mm-hmm.
the way the Jews are speaking up about the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm. I never thought of that. That's interesting. Yeah.
The amazing part about it is this whole concept of the Nordic Aryan,
Mm-hmm.
none of it Nazi hierarchy.
None of it what?
What'd you say?
The model of the Nordic Aryan, the perfect Nazi, the perfect German, blonde hair, blue eyes, none of the Nazi hierarchy.
Oh, none of them fit that, you're saying?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's just amazing that the other groups have not picked, have not spoken up about it. We don't hear a lot about the Japanese problem or the Vietnam problem. I don't know if it's because we are too close to it or whatever. I don't think any of that's taught in school.
Well, they don't think that they want to remember.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's why they don't focus on it.
Yeah, well, Vietnam sort of leaves
Vietnam
me
Vietnam
very,
ended
very,
50 years ago, not that long ago, I was there.
yeah.
And so it just, it's, when your history book, when the most recent social studies book that I saw, was used in North Carolina, George Bush, the 43rd Bush, is president. So you take that for what it's worth. It's because nobody buys books anymore.
Right.
Thank you. Great discussion, and thank you for sharing your thoughts. I want to read this on page 229 after the Shoah. So it says, there emerges for us a 614th commandment, because there's 613 in the Bible, in the Torah, sorry. The Jew today is forbidden to hand Hitler a posthumous victory. We are commanded to survive as Jews, lest the Jewish people perish. We are commanded to remember in our very guts and bones the martyrs of the Holocaust, lest their memory perish. We are forbidden to deny or despair of God, however much we may have to contend with God and our beliefs, lest Judaism perish. We are forbidden to despair of the world as the place which is meant to become the kingdom of God, lest we help make it a meaningless place. To abandon any of these imperatives in response to Hitler's victories at Auschwitz would be to hand him yet other posthumous victories. It's kind of powerful if you take in all of those words. What is that? What is it telling us, basically?
Not to forget.
Not to forget,
I think that it's
to survive.
I think it's pointing, I think he's pointing out that like any like lost memory like is a win, is a victory for what they were trying to do. And that highlights the importance of keeping the memory of what happened, because I think to ignore it or forget the people who died would just be allowing that to be, I don't know, I can't say that enough. Like, I just think that's a really powerful statement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Not to give it to despair.
Right.
Yeah.
Like to always have hope, right? What, Hatikva, the Israeli national anthem, is all the hope, right? Without hope, what is there? I mean, it's amazing because if for those of you who have met Irving, and for those of you who don't know him, he's like the nicest person, such a kind, gentle soul. And you think of the life he lived as a kid, and you hear other people's testimonies of the horrors they went through, and like they're the nicest people. And you would think that they could have come out being like a terrible person and just being so resentful and everything, but they like didn't give into that, right? They are nice, good, kind, decent people. I mean, it's really amazing. But yeah, you have to have faith, because without faith, what is there? And then we'll just read the one on the bottom by Rabbi Irving Greenberg. After Auschwitz, there are times when faith is overcome. We now speak of moment faith, interspersed with times when the flames and the smoke of burning children blot out faith, although it flickers again. The difference between the skeptic and the believer is frequency of faith, not certitude of position. So again, speaking of faith and how important it is, your faith, doesn't always have to be steadfast. There can be moments when you're not sure, but you still have to have this idea of faith. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Beth?
You had said that about pilgrimage and going back. So they always do the European before Israel.
Exactly.
when I went on pilgrimage, my grandfather forbid me to go to Poland first. I was only allowed to go to just the Israel trip.
Because he didn't want you to see it.
He absolutely wants nothing, he wanted
Nothing to do with it.
And like he always told me, you are never go to Germany. You're in Germany, you're never, like, but that was so real to him because he lost so many members of his family that he was just, I mean, it was also old world, I mean.
Yeah, of course.
But I just remember that making such an impact on me, not being allowed to do that and not being able to, not that I have a German car, but you know, you're not to get a German car because you know that Germany still reparations, that's what they drive in Israel. And like everything he always said to me was like, my family died there, you are not to go back there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is for a lot of people. They just want to leave it completely behind and have no association with it, which is completely understandable. Any other closing thoughts on this? And then I just have 2 matters of housekeeping business. Yes.
I have a friend who is from Germany, and she gets very upset with anti-Semitism, even more so sometimes more mad than I am, because in Germany, you are not allowed to say anything or act anti-Semitic. They actually will put you in jail for doing that. She gets very, very defensive if somebody says anything negative. She's not Jewish.
Right.
I was the first Jewish person she ever met. And she still gets very defensive if she hears somebody talking ill about Jews, because she was brought up that.
Just cannot do that. Can't go there.
It reminds me of what I said earlier about those cycles.
Yeah.
You read about people who love Jews. After a purge, they love Jews. Sorry. They invite them in, they, you know, dedicate statues and museums or whatever to them. And it just makes me kind of
Are you worried?
skeptical about the future. And you know, tomorrow they changed a law that says, hey, this is against free speech to jail people who are anti-Semitic. Maybe we should allow Germans to feel free to say what they want in their own country. And then the day after, another law. And
very scary. I mean, you can hear from the way Irving was telling you, one day it was this, one day it was that, one day this wasn't allowed, the next day that wasn't allowed. And it is scary. Freedom is a wonderful thing, but it's scary, you know, because it can be taken at any time. And so quickly, correct. Which is I think the scariest thing, right? Could happen literally like overnight, out of nowhere. So next week we will be, past 2 weeks have kind of been heavy topics, death and mourning, and this week with the Holocaust. Next week we'll be talking about a lighter subject, a happier subject, Israel, which is great. I love Israel. But 2 matters of housekeeping. So one is, I know not everyone is not here, but for those who are here, I wanted to figure it out. So this class was originally supposed to end on June 22nd. Because Rabbi Wolf didn't teach the week before Passover, we were going to extend it. So I wanted to see, because I wanted to make sure people are still here, if we do want to go to July 29th, or do we just want to skip that class that he was, sorry, June 29th, June 29th? Do we still want to go to June 29th? Does that still work for people? People will be here?
Fine for me.
Your birthday?
No, I said it's fine.
Oh, great,
It's on my
okay.
calendar.
Okay, what'd you say?
It's on my calendar if I'm out of quarantine.
You're not here, I know. Okay, so people will be here. Okay, so we have it till June 29th, and we will have a birthday cake for Bunny. That's a perfect way to celebrate the last class. And the other thing I wanted to see if people were interested in, a couple people came to me and said, wouldn't it be great if we had a Shabbat dinner together? So I also thought it would be lovely. So I spoke to Rabbi Walk, who also thought it would be a lovely idea. So the date that works for us, and wanted to see if it worked for the majority, is Friday, July 8th. So you don't have to fully commit. No, not good for you. No?
It's fine. It's good for everybody.
Some people might be. I just want to make sure if we, good.
That works for us.
Okay.
We would just have to check. We have a bunch of families on that.
Sure.
But.
Oh, Beth, I'm sorry. All right, so I will send something out. I'm working with Jared, so it'll be here. So we'll all come to services, and then it'll probably be set up in here, but it won't be set up at these tables. And you know, your spouses, kids, whoever is at home with you are invited to come as well. So I will put that together and send that out. And you know, even if this class is over, if we want to do another one in August, I'm happy to try to, you know, put that together as well for us. All right, thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you, Rabbi.
I just realized I might be back.